Hello hockey fans, and welcome back to another episode of Buyer's Remorse, the series where we look back at some of the biggest trades, signings, or other acquisitions in league history, but teams didn't quite get what they paid for. In today's episode, we are going to be taking a look at a trade between two Original Six franchises that has become known as one of the most lopsided deals in either team's history, as we explore why the Scott Gomez-Ryan McDonagh trade gave one team all the buyer's remorse. Before we begin, the very first episode of the Europuck podcast is now available on YouTube or anywhere else you get your podcasts. So if you're interested in listening to me discuss everything from the KHL to the SHL, the Finnish Liga to the Swiss National League, or even the British Elite League, subscribe to the Europuck podcast YouTube channel. A link will be in the pinned comment and the description down below. But anyways, on with the video. So let's start by taking a look at the trade itself. On June 30th, 2009, it was announced that the Montreal Canadiens, who had finished the prior 08-09 NHL season at 8th place in the Eastern Conference before a first-round sweep at the hands of the Boston Bruins, had traded Pavel Valentenko, Ryan McDonagh, Doug Janick and Chris Higgins to the New York Rangers, who had finished their 08-09 season at 7th place in the Eastern Conference before a Game 7 first-round exit by the Washington Capitals in exchange for Tom Pyatt, Scott Gomez and Michael Busto. So two Eastern Conference teams who had both clinched a playoff berth the year prior and were both eliminated in the first round swapped 7 different players, with 4 going to New York and 3 going to Montreal. Rather than me just focusing on the big hitters in this deal, for the sake of attention to detail, I'm going to go through all 7 players and their careers before the trade in order to make sure they each get their time in the spotlight. There's going to be a lot of information here, so buckle up, folks. Let's kick things off with the players acquired by New York and the most established name of the 4 with Chris Higgins. The 14th overall pick of the 2002 NHL entry draft by Montreal, Higgins would join the Habs roster full-time in 2005 after another year at college and then a year or two bouncing between the Habs and the Hamilton Bulldogs of the AHL. From there, Higgins would spend the next 5 seasons suiting up for the Bleu, Blanc et Rouge, scoring 84 goals and 151 points in 282 regular season games, as well as 11 points in 22 playoff games. Next up heading New York's way, we have Doug Janick. The 55th overall pick of the 1999 draft by the Buffalo Sabres, Janick would spend the next decade of his career bouncing around a number of NHL and AHL teams. The defensive defenseman would suit up for the Sabres, the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Dallas Stars before joining the Habs organization for the 08-09 season, and had scored 16 points in 161 NHL games until his trade to the Rangers. Penultimately for New York, we have Pavel Valentenko. A 5th round pick by Montreal in the 2006 draft, Valentenko briefly took to the ice with the AHL's Hamilton Bulldogs before heading home to Russia and spending the season and a half before the trade with the KHL's Dynamo Moscow, scoring a single point in 15 games for his efforts. Last but certainly not least for the Rangers, we of course have Ryan McDonagh. The asset with the most value and potential for New York, given his 12th overall selection at the 2007 draft, McDonagh had spent his past 2 seasons refining his game in college, scoring 9 goals and 34 points in 79 games at the University of Wisconsin. So those were the 4 acquisitions by the Rangers. Let's take a look at the Habs' incoming assets now and begin with Tom Pyatt. A 4th round pick by the Rangers in the 2005 draft, Pyatt spent a few more years with the OHL Saginaw Spirit after his selection, before turning pro in 2007 and joining the AHL, where he scored 19 goals and 48 points in 115 games before the trade. Penultimately for the Habs, we have Michael Busto. An undrafted defenseman out of the WHL, Busto had spent the last 2 seasons pre-trade in the ECHL with the Charlotte Checkers, and had scored 7 goals and 27 points in 102 games. Lastly, the final player for the Habs, and the most valuable piece of the deal for either side at the time, Scott Gomez. The 27th overall pick of the 1998 draft by the New Jersey Devils, Gomez joined the NHL for the 99-2000 season, spent the first 7 years of his career in New Jersey, where he earned a reputation as a top playmaker in the league, before signing a 5-year, $51.5 million contract with the New York Rangers on July 1st, 2007. Gomez would then spend the next 2 seasons on Broadway and would continue to score at a productive pace for the Blue Shirts, notching 128 points in 158 games to bring his career totals to 148 goals and 578 points in 707 regular season games, as well as 71 points in 114 playoff games. Not only that, but Gomez would also earn several awards and accolades before the trade too, such as the Calder Memorial Trophy for Rookie of the Year, 3 All-Star appearances, and 2 Stanley Cup Championships. So yeah, Gomez was a pretty good player back in 2009. Given the respective positions these two teams were in at the time, I can see why this trade was made. Montreal had crafted an impressive roster comprising of top 6 talents like Thomas Plekanec, Mike Camilleri and Brian Gionta, a reliable yet productive blue line in Andrei Markov, Marc-Andre Bergeron and Roman Hamrlik, as well as a goaltending duo consisting of a young Carey Price and an up-and-coming 9th round pick in Yaroslav Halak. Remember, this is 2009 we are talking about here, so although we may look back on some of these players' careers now with a slightly different perspective than the popular opinion at the time, many of these players were either very young or still in the primes of their careers and had plenty of very good hockey left to play. By adding a productive playmaker like Gomez to their already talented roster, the Habs felt that they now had a team that could contend against the big guns of the Eastern Conference, like Alexander Ovechkin's Washington Capitals or Sidney Crosby's defending Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins, and they might even have enough depth and talent to be considered a legitimate Cup contender moving forwards, and perhaps even lift their first Stanley Cup Championship in almost 20 years. On the flip side, the Rangers were willing to part ways with their team's top point scorer and his $7 million yearly cap hit, as they were looking to add more goal scoring to their roster, especially since their highest goal getter the year prior was a 37-year-old, 24-goal Marcus Naslund who retired at the end of the season. New York had found just the man to fill the void in upcoming free agent Marian Gaborik, but they didn't have the required cap space to sign him and bring his high-scoring talents to the Big Apple. So by trading Gomez, the Rangers would free up the necessary space to go and sign Gaborik, replace their top playmaker with a talented goalscorer, as well as add some other impressive pieces both for the present and for the future, such as a top 9 forward in Higgins and a 12th overall pick from just 2 years prior in McDonagh. So now that we know why this deal was made, let's take a look at what happened after the trade and see why one team would go on to reap the rewards, while the other would be asking for a refund. Let's get the smaller, less significant pieces of the deal out of the way first, and then finish off with the big names, shall we? Michael Busto would never suit up for either the Canadiens or their AHL affiliate, instead sticking around in the ECHL in the years after the trade. The undrafted defenseman would conclude his career at the end of the 12-13 season, having spent the year in the French League, and called it a day with 44 points in 176 ECHL games to his name. Pavel Valentenko would go on to play 2 seasons with the Rangers AHL affiliates in Hartford and Connecticut, scoring 10 goals and 38 points in 139 games, before returning to his homeland in order to rejoin the KHL. Since then, the former 5th round pick spent 7 seasons playing for a variety of teams in Russia's top league, before joining HC Ugra of the VHL for the 18-19 season, a team he continues to play for to this day. Doug Janick would go unsigned by the Rangers after the trade, so he took his talents to Michigan and joined the Detroit Red Wings instead. The American defenseman then spent the next 3 seasons bouncing between the Red Wings and the Grand Rapids Griffins, where he scored 3 points in 29 NHL games, before splitting the final 3 years of his career between the minors and overseas. After spending the 14-15 season in Italy, Janick would retire from the sport, having scored 19 points in 190 NHL games. Tom Pyatt is the first player of this deal to have actually suited up for the team that acquired him, as he played 2 seasons on the Habs roster, but his effectiveness was limited at best, since he scored 15 points in 101 games. After leaving the team as a free agent and signing with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2011, the Canadian forward would go on to play 6 more seasons in the league, split between the Lightning and the Ottawa Senators, where he has scored a grand total of 43 goals and 101 points in 445 games at the time of this recording. I say at the time of this recording because 1, he hasn't retired yet, and 2, he's already found a way to return to the NHL after a few years away once before, so don't count him out just yet, folks. Chris Higgins would play just 55 games in a Rangers jersey and scored 14 points for his efforts before being traded to the Calgary Flames on February 2nd, 2010. From there, the former first-round pick would play another 7.5 seasons in the league, split between the Flames, the Florida Panthers, and mostly the Vancouver Canucks, where he continued to be a pretty productive player by scoring 36 points or more in 3 different seasons. After splitting the 15-16 season between the Canucks and their AHL affiliate, Higgins would retire at the end of the year, finishing his 12-year NHL career with 165 goals and 333 points in 711 regular season games. So 5 players into this trade, the Habs have received 15 points in 101 games, whilst the Rangers have picked up 14 points in 55 games. Guys, a good thing we saved the best for last, because otherwise this trade would have been underwhelming at best and downright boring at worst. Penultimately, Scott Gomez would play the next 3 seasons of his career with the Habs, and although his first year in Montreal went pretty well, things would quickly spiral from bad to worse. The former Rookie of the Year and 2-time Stanley Cup Champion would score just 21 goals and 108 points in 196 games, which may not sound that terrible on the surface, but 59 of those points came during his first season on the team. So during his final 2 years in Montreal, a period of time in which he earned a little over $14 million, Gomez produced just 49 points in 118 games, including just 11 points in 38 games during the 11-12 season. Considering he earned over $21 million while playing for the Habs, and he scored at almost a point every 2-game pace over his entire stint with the team, I think it's fair to say that Gomez didn't live up to his contract, don't you? In fact, Gomez's play had been so disappointing that the Habs decided to use one of their compliance buyouts from the new collective bargaining agreement to buy out the final 2 years of his deal in order to get rid of both him and his cap hit off their roster. Not exactly the ending they were hoping for when they gave up several high-value assets to get him, but hey, at least the final $14 million of his deal didn't count towards their salary cap. After leaving the Habs behind, Gomez would go on to play another 4 seasons in the league, split between the San Jose Sharks, the Florida Panthers, another stint with the New Jersey Devils, the St. Louis Blues, and the Ottawa Senators. Having spent the final 13 games of the 15-16 season with Ottawa, Gomez would hang up his skates and retire from the sport, finishing his career with 181 goals and 756 points in 1,079 NHL games. And finally, last but definitely not least here, Ryan McDonagh would spend another year after the trade at the University of Wisconsin before joining the Rangers organization in 2010. Not only would the American defenseman make his NHL debut with the Rangers on January 7th, 2011, he would go on to play parts of 8 seasons in New York, becoming one of, if not the franchise's best blue liner over the last decade. In 516 games with the Rangers, McDonagh scored 51 goals and 238 points, adding an extra 41 points in 96 playoff games too. Pretty good numbers for a defenseman, eh folks? Not only that, but McDonagh would also receive several accolades during his time on Broadway, as he was named a 2-time All-Star and served as captain of the team for 4 years, until his trade to the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2018. McDonagh continues to suit up for Tampa to this very day, and thanks to scoring 61 points in 146 games over the last 3 seasons, he has brought his career totals to 63 goals and 299 points in 662 regular season games at the time of this recording. So from the 7 players exchanged in this deal, the Montreal Canadiens would receive 123 points in 297 games, whilst the Rangers would pick up 252 points in 571 games. Sure, there isn't a huge amount of difference in the points per game here, but considering Montreal gave up a 30 to 40 point scorer and a top defensive prospect in exchange for a low-scoring depth player and 3 years of declining production from a $7 million a year contract, this wasn't exactly their finest trade, was it? So, in conclusion, when the New York Rangers and the Montreal Canadiens conducted a deal in June of 2009, both sides figured they were getting exactly what they wanted at the time. Montreal were adding a productive playmaker to their already strong top six in the hopes of bolstering their roster enough to make a deep playoff run, whilst New York wanted to free themselves of their star player's hefty contract in order to sign another marquee free agent and add a few extra pieces that could help them both in the short term and for the future. What actually happened was the Canadiens received 3 years of gradually declining production from their once star player before buying him out of the final 2 years of his deal, whilst the Rangers briefly added a top 9 scorer to their team, freed up the cap space to sign said free agent who would become a top goal scorer for them, whilst also adding one of their best defensemen in the last decade and an eventual captain of their franchise. For the Rangers, this was one of the greatest trades they have ever made. For the Habs, this was far from money well spent. And that's how the Scott Gomez-Ryan McDonagh trade gave the Montreal Canadiens all the buyer's remorse. What do you guys think about this trade? Also, is there another acquisition, free agency signing or trade deadline you would like me to look at as part of this series? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Antti Hannanen, Chris Gadsby, Connor B, John Plomin, Jordan Whitehead, Martin Tolness, Paul Mallia, Roman from London, The Legacy and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.